I think Manon Lescaut is one of those operas that always lives on the edge. It's not one of the top 10. Certainly, Puccini is well represented with La Bohème and Madame Butterfly and Tosca, Turandot. I think that it is an opera that, as good as it is, does have some issues. It was a very young composer writing it. It was the opera that pretty much put him on the map as the successor to Verdi. And it was a subject that was fascinating to the European public at that time.
Manon Lescaut is a classic story of a woman who knows what she wants and she knows how to go about getting it. Now, sort of nowadays, she'd normally be viewed perhaps as a strong-willed, iron, feminist woman. You know, she has business to do and she's going to get it done. Back then, she's condemned by society for the way that she lives her life, and eventually society brings her down and causes her downfall. So she loves two different men, and she loves one because he's very handsome and very romantic, and then she loves an older man because he can support her in the way that the manner to which she's become accustomed. She likes pretty things. She likes glitter and gold and riches. So she wants both, and she wants to find a way to get them both.
It basically is an opera that is beautiful, but also very difficult for the two principals. Desgrieux and Manon are very difficult roles to sing. Manon especially has to progress really from a somewhat young and innocent girl to dying at the end, much like many of the other Puccini heroines. She sometimes can come across as a bit of a gold digger, but she isn't really, you know, and that's what attracted Puccini originally, was that quality to Manon that she ultimately does choose love. Desgrieux the same way. He's got to appear young, innocent, falling head over heels in love with the moment he sees her, as Puccini is often asking his singers to do. But also, he has to appear to be very masculine, very forceful, and somebody that can overcome lack of money with his force of personality and his love for Manon. Kelly Kaduce is a very special artist. We've had her here for quite a few pieces, and we've watched her grow from, you know, a rather light lyric soprano to, I think, a spinto soprano capable of singing bigger roles like Madame Butterfly, which is really her signature role now. She sings it better than anybody since Renata Scotto, I believe. And she brings to her work such passion and integrity.
Well, I've done a lot of Puccini, a lot of the Puccini heroines, and this role has been mentioned to me a lot, and this, you know, Minnesota Opera came up with this opportunity and asked me, and I jumped at it. And I have to say it's very different than the other Puccini roles that I've learned, you know, and I have to say I just did Liu here last year for the first time, and I sat down to learn it. And I have such a grasp as to how, I really know his musical language quite well. So I have some expectations when I sit down. I kind of have an idea of how I think it's going to go. So when I sat down for this role, I was taken aback, especially by the second act love duet. It is very unlike the Puccini that I have done in the past. It's my idea of what Puccini has been for me is it's very lyric lines. There's not much vocal jumping around through the registers. It's very fluid, very liquid. It's very melodic and very lush on the voice. And not that this isn't, but when I got to that second act duet where it's very verismo, it's the harmonies change every two measures. The vocal line has a tendency to have more leaps in it than usual, And I found it very interesting, and I have to say, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. I was expecting to kind of breeze through it and learn it real quickly, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, I have to sit down and try to understand this language. So I think it's fascinating. If you think of, like, if you were to look at the life of a painter, you can see his paintings from when he's studying to the end to what we know of him. And it's kind of the same with Puccini. You sit down and you look at these earlier operas, and you can see the influence as he's trying to find his language. And then I think his later operas, he kind of simplified. He was like, oh, I can go back to a simpler melody. I can kind of leave with some tunes to sing. I mean, he kind of embraced that, which I think maybe these earlier operas, he was thinking that that wasn't the trend of the time. But he embraced, I think, what he loved and what he knew. It's interesting.
Rob Ainsley he comes to us from Portland Opera, but he's also the head of music at Opera Theater of St. Louis. And prior to that, he was in the training program at the Metropolitan Opera. He's a superb chorus master, really one of the best, I would say. And he's a master coach, which we've also been lacking the past few years. He has a broad knowledge of languages, styles, and he has a great passion for coaching. He loves to teach, and he loves to impart knowledge to young singers. It's a real skill that not many people have, and you just feel that sort of wave of the love of opera coming from Rob Ainsley. So I think we're really lucky to have been able to bring him here.
Puccini's music is popular because never in the history of opera has there been a man with a greater grasp of the theatre. He knows exactly how long something needs to go on for, and he knows exactly, I mean, he's manipulative as a composer. He knows exactly where your heartstrings are, and he knows how he's going to pull on them at exactly the right time. He can sustain the dramatic tension up until the breaking point, and then you're in floods of tears every time. He's a genius with it. He ended up taking over the throne, Verdi's throne, of the head of Italian opera, the head of the Italian opera school. But he did that by using non-Italian techniques. So the genius with Puccini is that he is streets ahead of all of his contemporaries around the turn of the century, around 1900, in terms of what he can do with an orchestra. His orchestrations are so detailed and so beautiful and so well thought out. But within that, into the musical structure, as well as obviously with these glorious Italian melodic vocal lines, into the orchestra, he can incorporate German and French and Austrian techniques without any of that esoteric heaviness that comes with Wagner. So Manon Lescaut, for example, is full of almost direct quotations from Tristan, Wagner's great love opera. And it's that sort of intoxicating harmonic mélange, that sort of melting pot of harmonies and these glorious thought-out orchestrations that make Puccini so lush and so new and so theatrical every time we hear them.
If you think about the time frame we're looking at the late 1700s in France, and I think her father didn't know what to do with her. She was a young girl, a teenager who loved to have a good time, and he was kind of out of his realm of what to do with her, so he just decides to send her off to a convent. And I don't know if you can imagine being a 15-year-old girl and being told that you are never going to experience all of the fantasies you had in your head of living life and enjoying society, etc. And so this feels like a death sentence to her. So she's kind of left with no other option than to run away. This handsome guy shows up and presents her with this offer to run away, and she just jumps at it. So she takes off, and if you think about it, a woman in the late 1700s in France, what do you do for income? She knows that they're running out of income, and she suspects that Des Grieux wants to live, the luscious life that they've been living as well. So she starts taking up the company of men. So in my mind, to reconcile that she's, you know, not just a gold digger to find something a little more. I actually think of her a little bit as a feminist. She's doing what she has to do, the only option she has to support her and her lover. And on the surface, that can look like she's quite a shallow person. But when you factor in the fact that she's very young and mistakes living the high life with being happy, it kind of all makes sense.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have Michael Cavanagh come back for this, and I was thrilled when we were thinking about Manon Lescaut and thinking about this production. I was thrilled to find out that he had directed it just last year in Philadelphia. Having Michael around, it's like having your best friend, quite honestly, and the guy that you always want to come to the party. You know, he's so full of fun, and he brings such warmth to the rehearsal room. He gets all of his actors to do quite wonderful things simply because he's such a dear, dear man. So it was really wonderful to have him come back.
The most important element dramaturgically is this notion, thematically I guess even better way to put that, is this idea of time being finite and opportunities for love and for greatness and for getting everything you can out of life are fleeting, and that the real tragedy in these stories is the loss of time, not the loss of life. The idea that well, when people die, it's very sad, and some circumstances are sadder than others, but the most tragic of this set of circumstances is when people have an opportunity to fully enjoy a happiness, which is so rare, especially kind of complete happiness as embodied by true love. And they don't realize it at the time, or they don't take advantage of it at the time, or they're afraid of it, or they can't handle it for whatever reason, either internal or external. And as a result, their opportunity for that happiness is lost. And that is a tragedy. And he's starting to explore that in Manon Lescaut. And something about the primal, sweeping nature of his tunes, of the way he puts melody into this thick orchestration, it just is so powerful and somehow resonates for the tragedy of lost opportunity. I can't exactly articulate why, but I know for a fact that this is the big thematic material that he starts to get a handle on in Manon Lescaut, and that later comes to full fruition.
Stop there. Good. And that's why you have that phrase there.
Great.